Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. In the wake of the Monaco Grand Prix with Charles Leclerc taking victory, big questions raised as to how close we presently are to the performance ceiling of these cars. We know that Mercedes have plenty more upgrades to bring, but they are somewhat behind the curve. Ferrari though say, yes, Red Bull might still be the strongest car, but they have much more in the works, certainly on their qualifying pace, and Fred Vasseur still saying they are seeing dividend in the factory when it comes to upgrades. They will bring even further down the line. If they improve their car much further, will somebody else actually have the fastest car in F1 for the first time in several years? Very much into your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. First of all, more chaos at Alpine, as is always the case. They have got rid of, sacked effectively, their veteran operations director Rob White. So they are doing an operational restructure as part of their 1,200 race plan back to race victories. I don't even know what's going on at this point, but we talked yesterday that there are rumours that Alpine are going to blow it up effectively, or at least they are considering sacking off their engine project entirely and just becoming an Alpine team in name only effectively, and basically changing entirely the way they are structuring their Formula 1 division just because it ain't working. And you can see why, despite all the drama with Ocon and Gasly and Ocon wanting to leave maybe or getting forced out or whatever the case is, you can certainly see why Ocon might want out of this absolute mess, and he might be forced out of this absolute mess, which who knows if that will end up being a blessing in disguise in the longer term. Sargent, by the way, is definitely not staying at Williams. Albon will be there, and there's actually so much other interest in the Williams seats that it just feels almost impossible that Sargent will stay. Not just from Bottas. We, of course, yesterday talked that Audi, if they're not interested in Sainz, which they are, so if Sainz isn't interested in them, he might go to Williams as a sensible option, and actually Williams might make a lot of sense, even more sense potentially than Audi in the near term, based on what we discussed yesterday. But it's not just Sainz that are interested. You might wonder if Williams gets the choice, right, between Sainz or between Bottas, who they would go for. You'd think they'd probably go for Sainz, theoretically the stronger driver right now, but maybe it's not so clear, from a political perspective. Sainz maybe could cause problems with Albon, who knows really, but Bottas is a fast qualifier. I guess if I'm Williams, I am having the conversation. If Bottas and Sainz are both interested, Sainz also has the Audi offer, but he might turn it down to go for Williams. Do I take Sainz over Bottas? I think there are, benefits and cons to both kind of, potential decisions. But either way, one of them probably gets next year's seat alongside Albon. That is the feeling. Obviously, Sainz, if he doesn't go to Audi and potentially goes to Williams, there's also Yuki Tsunoda as an option for Audi, but even I think Tsunoda might prefer to go to even a Haas or something over Audi for now, just because that maybe keeps the door open a little bit more for him to go to Aston Martin, maybe with Honda in the future. That's a prospect. There's also been some that have said, could Sainz go back to RB, right? Go back to the sister team to Red Bull, and therefore, work there for a year or two, and then therefore get the Red Bull seat that way. I don't really know, but it's all in a mess right now, and we are not really any closer to the answers. What we do know is that Alpine will certainly need one driver, we believe. It seems absolutely untenable that Ocon and Gasly will remain teammates into next season. We're pretty sure that Haas are getting Ollie Behrman, and they're not getting Hülkenberg because he's an Audi now, and they're probably not going to keep Kevin Magnussen, let's be real, on recent performances. And of course, he might be dropped from a race as well if he gets more penalty points, which he probably should have got after Monaco, but he didn't. So we'll see what he's cooking up next time out in Canada, because, K-Mag is on an absolute reign of terror at the moment over these last few rounds. Mick Schumacher has now been linked to an IndyCar seat, but apparently they have basically said, the Dale Coyne racing team that he was talking to, that he'd prefer to secure the F1 return. That's his primary target, Mick Schumacher. But if that doesn't happen, which it more than likely will not at this point, then a move to IndyCar is certainly possible. Of course, he's doing the WEC stuff potentially with Alpine, and of course that makes Jack Doohan, junior driver for Alpine, an actual target to join them in 2025. So it's all over the place. It's all an absolute mess. We've got to talk Mercedes as well, because we've mentioned the driver market today without talking Andrea Kimi Antonelli so far, so we've got to do it. We heard the rumours a while ago that they had Antonelli, they had Mick Schumacher, they had George Russell, all at the same time doing testing a few weeks ago. And this was considered by many from the outside to be some sort of, shootout or private test, or effectively to try and compare and contrast the respective performance of their drivers. Now, Mercedes are going to say publicly, no, this was not a shootout, that was incorrectly labelled. We had neither the intention nor the findings of the running was to take anything away from that. We were just testing the cars. But let's be honest here, this is Formula One, you know. I'm sure that those guys were looking at the data, and there have been some rumours saying that, well, Antonelli's numbers were really impressive here compared to the numbers of the other guys. There were even some reports saying that he'd beaten Russell in the test. In terms of lap times, that obviously, you know, maybe Russell wasn't going for lap times or whatever, maybe different track conditions, who knows. But I think regardless of what Mercedes are going to say on this, the feeling is that Antonelli, they think, is the real deal. They're going to put him in the car next season. If they were fighting for the championship next year, like if they were in a position like they were in 2020, 2021, they probably would prefer not to put a rookie in their car. But right now, Mercedes are borderline a midfield team. So I don't really see why it's so much of a risk to put him in the car. Typically, you'd send him to Williams, right? But I'm not sure Mercedes are in the same spot now than they were previously. And that was exemplified actually by Hamilton. He was on the Hot Ones show with Sean Evans. And this is actually a phenomenal episode. I thought Hamilton handled himself really well, as of course he always does. But I thought this was especially interesting. So he was asked the question, when did you feel the most kind of at odds with your machinery? And he just straight up said, yeah, right now. Like if there was any time that he's kind of struggling with the car, now is the time that he's struggling most with the car. As he says, yeah, right now. So, you know, driving the W15, not exactly sure how long ago this was filmed, and the car has improved probably since it was filmed, but I think you can quite clearly tell here that Hamilton is, you know, fed up of Mercedes in many ways, and you can also see why he might be, based on what we've discussed even over the last couple of days. All this like weird internal stuff, George Russell saying certain things, Toto Wolff saying, oh no, we're treating the drivers equally, but I can understand why Hamilton's concerned about it, and all these other things. Like, it's a strange environment at Mercedes. I can absolutely assume that Hamilton will be looking forward to leaving, and honestly looking forward to driving a better car that may be designed in part by this man Adrian Newey, certainly for 2026. We're not really sure on this. The rumours on it, Newey, have kind of calmed down, as I thought they would, because I still think that he's going to bide his time. But there have been some that have said that this deal is done. So Guido van der Garde, Formula One driver in the late 2000s, early 2010s, he actually drove, I think, for Sauber towards the end of his career, but actually that was the Sauber just before Fred Vasseur arrived. So I'm not sure I was wondering, like, is he really close to Vasseur and therefore he might actually know something here? But I'm not so sure he is. So this might just be speculation here from Van der Garde, to be honest. But basically he says that Newey's already got the deal and Newey is sorted. And there have been other speculations at Monaco, because Newey was at Monaco, that maybe Newey was there to sign the deal effectively, although there's no real concrete evidence to say that's actually the case, especially when, during the Monaco Grand Prix weekends, it was said by Michael Schmidt of AMUS, very reliable sources generally, that Ferrari is no longer interested in Adrian Newey. They've talked to, he's talked to Williams, he's talked to McLaren, obviously with Mercedes and Aston, although the rumour is that Mercedes aren't going to do that and that Newey doesn't want to go to Aston. So it was reported a week or so ago now that Newey to Ferrari is no longer a thing, by reliable sources. So, what do we make of this? I think from both sides, they're probably playing a bit of a game at this point. As far as Ferrari is concerned, yes, Fred Vasseur will say publicly, and for good reason, look, we want to ensure we're not disrupting the progress of the technical team. Ferrari are doing a killer job. But let's be real, when a new cycle of regulations comes around, as it will for 2026, having Newey on board in some capacity is absolutely an advantage. Now, sure, maybe there are problems that you've got to solve with integrating Newey into your technical team, but he's not someone you pass up lightly, obviously. So I think what's possibly more likely is that in the same way that Newey and his manager Eddie Jordan is saying, oh no, Newey's going to retire, like he's going to take some time off, like it's going to take really a lot of money to convince him to go somewhere, Ferrari are maybe saying, oh, you know what, we're not so interested, Mr. Adrian Newey, actually we're pretty happy with our technical team. My feeling is that it might just be kind of like contract posturing from both sides, but I guess we'll see what time tells on this. Especially interesting because of some of the videos we saw on the weekend. So here we are in Monaco, Toto Wolff on his scooter going past, and here's Lewis Hamilton signing some Ferrari caps. I don't know if you guys actually remember this, but when he first got announced, I think he was out there was it in South Korea or somewhere in Asia, I believe, and he was signing some, autographs as he usually does, and he was signing a Ferrari hat, and it caused a lot of talk actually because he saw the Ferrari hat and then he kind of smiled to the camera, right? And apparently the next, shortly after that, he was told by Mercedes, hey, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Don't sign any Ferrari hats. But apparently he either has been told otherwise now or simply doesn't care, because here he is signing some Ferrari hats for some fans. And so was Adrian Newey. I saw a couple of guys pointed out to this to me. It was seen on TikTok that here's Adrian Newey in the same spot, right, signing a Ferrari flag. So and they were kind of asking him, oh, Newey, you're going to join Ferrari and all this. guys, and he was obviously smiling at them. So, I don't know, what do you guys make of that? I thought it was interesting nonetheless to see Hamilton and Newey both getting involved in this. Fred Vasseur himself says, I'm not going to talk about Newey, because if I do so, any answer is going to be interpreted. The most important thing is the stability of the team. As I've said before, I think we are doing a good job in the right direction. The most important thing for me is the stability of the group. It is much more so than the individuals, but I would add that I'm really satisfied with the current situation. So kind of downplaying the whole Newey stuff now. So interesting to hear this, because it feels like, I wouldn't say a change of heart precisely, but it does feel like Ferrari are speaking differently publicly on the Newey stuff than maybe they were previously. And look, Vasseur is probably right to say this. And maybe after talks with Newey, there was a feeling that if we bring Newey in, it's going to compromise the technical structure they have. But my feeling is that it's still more than likely just contract posturing here between the two parties. But I guess time will tell on this one, because Newey doesn't also, I don't imagine, want to be working absolutely in the heart of the project every single day. His feeling at Red Bull has been, and his feeling generally seems to be a little bit more hands-off, working in this super consultant role where he gives you the ideas and then the team executes. Maybe that was even causing problems at Red Bull. I guess in hindsight, maybe that is true. Maybe Vasseur fears that it may also cause problems at Ferrari, but time will tell, because 2026, you probably want Newey on board, and I think most people probably realise that. He was also talking, Vasseur, about Brian Bozzi, of course, a new race engineer for Charles Leclerc, a race engineer that was not chosen by Charles Leclerc, we don't believe, or at least Charles was not informed before it happened that Xavi Marcos was going to go. But Brian Bozzi comes in, and I think many people who have listened to the comms have been very impressed, actually. Vasseur even says also, 2 very good weekends, no mistakes, and of course, Charles wins the Monaco Grand Prix, so it didn't work out too badly, did it? So that seems to be another great move there by Fred Vasseur in terms of structuring the team organisationally, and we are seeing the results as follows. Charles Leclerc 138 points so far this season, more than he's had at any point in his career so far, and even more than 2022, which, to be fair, after 8 races, he had a couple of DNFs, unfortunately, for Charles thrown in there, but nonetheless, a very competitive start to the season, and they are not far away from actually making this a competitive championship. 24 points only, I think it is, in the Constructors, which is as close as the Constructors has been at this point in the season since, I believe, 2018, so several years ago between Mercedes and Ferrari, of course, at the time, and this time it's between Ferrari again and Red Bull. But can Ferrari get even better? They've won the Monaco Grand Prix. Fred Vasseur is trying to be very clear that it's not, job done, we've won it, like the car's fantastic now, we're going to beat Red Bull every weekend. The feeling is like, no, Red Bull have had some problems for the last couple of weekends. They will likely go to Canada and be far better. But Ferrari say they have more to work on. Like, this isn't it, this isn't them done and they've made progress, but now Red Bull are going to streak ahead. This is them saying, look, we've got more upgrades in the works. Our car is not perfect. It was maybe better than they even expected it to be at Monaco. And crucially, they are finding more performance in the factory. This is the question that has been raised now for some time by multiple teams. How much performance is there really to gain? I think even Newey said it a while ago for Red Bull that they're definitely hitting a performance ceiling in terms of what is possible from their concept. And we usually see this towards the end of a cycle of regulations. This year, and quite possibly next year in 2025, the teams and the cars are getting very close to whatever potential ceiling exists, and as a result, you tend to get pretty banger seasons. And in 2026, well, we might be back to one team dominating again. I'm just hoping that if one team does dominate in 2026, it's a team with 2 competitive drivers, such as, let's say, Hamilton Leclerc, or Piastri Norris is another option, of course, out there. So, we'll see what time it decides. This is what Fred Vasseur has to say. When you bring an update, you also have to evaluate how this can affect the setup and changing other things as well. With the budget cap, there are many more variables to consider, but goes on to say, we've introduced some new features a week ago, obviously at Monaco, so it's early to talk about further upgrades, but we are continuing to push. We have to make sure we bring solutions to the track that give us a decent profit, effectively. The development work is giving us further earnings, so we will be bringing the update as soon as possible. So interesting that Mercedes, they say, and they are, bringing upgrades every single weekend. They've brought some upgrades to Imola, even to Monaco Mercedes, and it has improved their car, and they're pretty happy with the progress they've made. So Mercedes now seem confident that further upgrades they bring will actually work as intended, which did not seem to be the case several rounds ago. Ferrari are not bringing their upgrades every weekend. They're bringing slightly larger packages, I think, to bolt onto the car in due course. They brought one in Imola, of course, that seemed to have had good effect. I mean, they've won the next race after that, although they weren't as competitive as they would have liked in Imola. but they should be over the next couple of rounds. Fred Vasseur says that maximum they're going to be a tenth and a half off whatever the fastest car is, and they should be in the fight for the race victory every single weekend from now on. We'll see if that remains true over the next few rounds, but probably, Silverstone will be the next big upgrade time, whereas Mercedes are bringing things to Canada, Austria, Spain, and then Silverstone. Ferrari are bringing their next big upgrade package, somewhat further down the line, but at the same time, they're still seeing improvements, right? It's not just that they've got upgrades in the works that are going to bring changes. It's that their development work is still showing they are seeing performance improvements, even if those things aren't even yet manufactured. So we're talking from now at least to the end of the season, Ferrari are confident they can still keep making serious progress with their car, and even raises the question, is the Red Bull concept that, sure, there's been some alignment on, but is that Red Bull base idea and concept actually the potential fastest? Does that have the highest ceiling? Or are Red Bull reaching some limitations as they get close to that ceiling that other teams might not necessarily run into? We don't really know the answer to these questions, but Ferrari are saying that, yeah, their qualifying pace is somewhat weaker than they expected and hoped it would be, so the upgrades they bring will be determined on trying to improve their quali performance. So they know that there's progress to make here, and they're still committed to trying to see all that pace improvement to the circuit. Even Fred Vasseur says, which I think is absolutely the right mentality, that if nothing changes after Monaco. His point was that it doesn't matter that Ferrari have won Monaco, it doesn't change their mindset at all. He says, look, if you start to think you're in a good shape, then you're dead in this sport. So always searching for more, always trying to improve, and just Vasseur's leadership at Ferrari seems worlds away from Mr. Mattia. There's no reason why we can't win the next 10 races, Bonotto, right after he said that from Hungary in 2022. And I don't have to tell you guys how many races they won after he made that statement. McLaren are also in an interesting spot. They're almost suffering from success in some way, which is probably not a bad thing. And I'm sure Mercedes wish they had this problem, but they are looking for answers as to why their upgrades actually did more than they thought. Because McLaren brought their upgrades over the last couple of rounds, they still thought their slow speed corner performance would be somewhat underwhelming, but it's actually got a lot better, and they're kind of wondering why. So it seems to me a good problem to have that they thought, we've got more upgrades in the works that are going to bring the slow speed performance, and now they've already got some of that slow speed performance. So they're kind of confused, but in a good way, I suppose. So it makes things rather interesting, of course, for Red Bull. And Monaco was the worst Grand Prix that Red Bull have had in terms of points scored since the double DNF at Bahrain 2022, which feels an awful long time ago. Just one final thing to mention here before we close out the video on the Monaco Grand Prix situation, because I mentioned a couple of days ago solutions to the Grand Prix to make it less boring. Some have suggested, what about only running the soft tyre? This is what George Russell said, that if you only use the soft tyre, then at least the tyres will degrade, so pit stops are mandatory and all this stuff, which might be valid, but basically Pirelli say, not going to make a difference, guys. Just fix the track, I think, is their implication. Because they say if you only run the soft rubber, then possibly what happens is that the drivers, instead of driving 2 to 3 to 4 seconds slower than they could, they will drive 8 seconds slower than they could and still, preserve the tyres for a simple one-stop. So there is that option. He also mentioned the possibility of mandating a two-stop, which is kind of what I've talked about. How about you mandate all 3 compounds to be used to force a two-stop? And I do think that on average, that would make F1 more entertaining over the course of an entire season. But he did also make a fair point that sometimes the best races are races where there's someone on a one-stop and there's someone on a two-stop. And what's quicker? What's going to work? Is that guy going to be able to have enough juice when he catches up to overtaking all this stuff? Kind of like Spain 2021 vibes with Hamilton versus Verstappen on the 1-2 stop. Or, of course, the Budapest race that was similar slightly earlier in their careers. So mandating a two-stop might actually, reduce times where that occurs. But I still feel like it would probably be better on average. I don't know. It was interesting to see a counterpoint, though, to that argument. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.